freedom. There is absolutely no psychological fear, and you are beyond all gods.
And God said he should send his one begotten son to lead the wild into the ways of the man.
What does it matter?
Our home, our nation, all the things we believe in are in great danger.
Overtake, subjugate, and in fact destroy another.
I watched the plane fly into the World Trade Center.
Welcome, everybody, to our podcast, Idiotic Ideologies. Today, we have a very special guest, Chelsea Sanchez, who is the program director of CASA of McLennan County. And the reason why we have invited Chelsea to come onto the podcast today is because the focus is going to be on compassion. So that is what the discussion is going to be revolving around today. Chelsea has some very interesting stories, I'm sure. Don't worry, I won't put you on the spot too much. and a very interesting background that deals a lot with this very important topic. So I'm here with my host, Josh.
Yes, and before we get into it, I did want to kind of preface for the audience and then just for everybody that as we come together and talk about compassion, that none of us are coming from a place where we can say, I think we know what compassion is, because at that line, it just kind of creates this conflict. It creates this division between superiority. So us as ordinary people have invited Chelsea on because she observes things that most of us don't through our lives. And it's very important that we have that awareness of what's going on. Awesome.
I agree. Okay, Chelsea, I understand this is your first podcast.
Yes.
Don't be nervous.
My heart's beating really fast.
Me too.
Don't be nervous.
That's good.
It'll be a piece of cake. You'll be an old pro by the time this is all done.
All right.
All right. I'm just going to start with a couple of general questions. It says here, I looked on the CASA website, that you have over 7 years experience working with at-risk children, youth, refugees, and survivors of human trafficking.
Yes.
And that you're also a first-generation high school and college graduate. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, yes, I'm the first in my family to first graduate from high school and then to go on to college. And I think I just experienced, I just grew up in, poverty, really hard situations. But the one thing my family always taught me was just to love and be kind and to treat other people with dignity and respect. And so that was just a value that I've always carried with me. And I do have the legacy of both my mom and my grandma working at the Salvation Army for, my grandma actually just retired a couple years ago, and then my mom worked 19 years at the Salvation Army. So I was always serving, always just participating in serving the homeless or different activities like that. And so I think it was just how I grew up, just to love and to serve. And then that definitely just followed me throughout my life, and having the opportunity to go to Baylor and studied social work there, and I loved it with all my heart and got to get my master's as well. And my headphones are falling off my head. But yes, and so just having the opportunity to, again, just develop more practical skills and more knowledge around human behavior and trauma and different aspects of human life, and then how do we serve from that place as well. So just had the opportunity to serve children and youth that are at risk. Now I currently work in the foster care system, so serving children who have experienced abuse and neglect. And then I went overseas and worked with Syrian refugees, and so lived and worked in the camps alongside people who have fled their homes because of war and violence and other things like that. And as well spent the last 4 years serving survivors of human trafficking here in Waco.
Oh, really?
Yes, ma'am.
We have human trafficking. I must be naive. Do we have a human trafficking problem here in Waco?
Yes. Yes, we do.
Really?
Yes. So I would say we have a trafficking problem everywhere in the world. But yeah, we definitely have one here in Waco.
Wow.
Is that typically like that? I mean, my first thought is like, that's kidnapping. Like, I mean, I'm guessing that's what goes on. People literally, well, I guess we'll see a kid by themselves, or and they just straight up just run it and take the kid? And
That could happen. I would actually.
How is the structure of that human?
Yeah, so there's a lot into human trafficking, and
I bet there's a lot of manipulation and things. I don't know. It's just not. I'm gonna run and take you.
No,
put
that's
you in a
great.
van. Yeah.
No, yeah. So that happens, but it's very rare. So that would probably be. I wouldn't say it's a myth because it does happen, but that's more of the rare occasions of human trafficking. So human trafficking, it includes sex trafficking as well as labor trafficking, and it's just the force, fraud, and coercion of sexual acts or labor acts. And so when we involve a minor, you don't have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. It just has to be a commercial sex act. So that's a sex act, whether that's dancing, whether that's pornography, whether that's actual sex. It just has to be some type of sex act in exchange for something of value. And so when we're thinking about youth, when we're thinking about children in foster care, children are coming out of hard situations and they run away, and they need to meet their basic needs. And so maybe someone comes along and says, hey, you can stay here if you do X, Y, Z for me. And so that happens. And then we also just have a lot of vulnerability. So whether or not they run away, we have a lot of children who are just experiencing hard things, anxiety, feeling alone, feeling, scared, feeling like no one understands them. And someone comes along and says, comes in is, what they've always been looking for, right? A friend, a boyfriend, someone who cares about them. And then somewhere along the way, they use violence or different tactics to just trick them into like this abusive, what they believe is a loving relationship, but it's more abuse. So
that's some good insight because sex trafficking, you typically think of these kids there's a sex ring, and then they're being shipped to Mexico or somewhere, but it includes.
Oh, it's happening here.
But it also includes on the small scale of just like you said, I take you in and then I manipulate you to do certain X, Y, and Z to earn what I'm providing you in that moment. Okay.
And it also happens in families as well.
It's good to be
aware. So parents trafficking their own children or someone.
So do you think that these children in foster care are more vulnerable to things like that?
I would say everyone's vulnerable, but yes, children in foster care do have heightened vulnerability, whether that be, like I said, because, even just wanting to fit in at school is a really big deal. And I think that's something that we don't understand. We're having a lot of the families that we work with might come from more low income areas. And sometimes we want to judge them and say, why would you spend, this money on material things when you also need food, right? We kind of lack compassion is what we're getting at.
Yes.
Because we're judging them on how they're spending their money, but then we also don't realize for a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old in a school setting where peers, their friendships are the most important to them, and the mom is having to make a choice of, well, I can't buy you food, but I know how much fitting in at school is important to you. So let me buy you the pair of shoes or the new iPhone that you've been wanting, right? We're judging them on that when in reality, food is important. It's a big deal, and I want them to have food, but, they're also struggling too with just fitting in and feeling like they belong.
And that's a really good point. I mean, I've been in the HEB checkout line and had people mumble ahead of me when they see somebody pay with food stamps and say, well, why are they buying this or that? Why are they buying cookies? And it's like, well, it's really none of your business. Show a little compassion. You do not know the entire story of this family. So that's a really excellent point.
Can I say, and so with, I might have lost my train of thought. I was going to say with, with when your work as a social worker, and it kind of goes into education, but why does it seem like adults, and I would say it's I mean, we're kind of all guilty of it with parents, no matter if they're rich or poor, where when they communicate with their kid, there seems to be this lack of awareness, or it's like an atrophy of, when I talk to you, I understand that looking a certain way provides a certain value, but I'm gonna conversate with you in a way like, all right, to have conversations with my kids to show them that no matter what they say at school, like I understand that's tough for you, but I want to have communication with my kid on the fact of that value is not in that. Mm-hmm. And somehow getting deep with the kid, and I know it's hard for kids to wrap their heads around it because they're like, but Mom, I'm getting ridiculed, I'm feeling alone. And for the parent to somehow have a certain, I guess the word would be education, to talk to that kid and communicate in a different quality except for feeling pain for the kid. All right, I'm gonna work 2 jobs now to buy you Jordans, instead of saying that same effort of working 2 jobs, I'm gonna put that effort into my communication, not just with you, but with your school, with the teachers, but come from a place of not aggression, but from a place of, look, teachers, like we all want to think like we're doing right now, thinking together about why this is going on. What's your perspective on
I think that gets a little tricky, right? Because we all carry our own values, and we all carry.
Don't we want to stop that, since we see how it's such conflict and it's such a ridiculous thing to keep feeding that monster, so to speak, of value in what I wear, value in my money, value in when the value is in my quality of life, and in this word compassion. The compassion has been so ran over and so spit on, and this word seems to not carry any more value, and that's where my concern is, and where my compassion comes from. You know,
yeah, I mean, I think those are great.
What is the holdup of that?
I think those are great questions to ask. I don't know if I have an answer necessarily to
well,
why
I just
do we
know
want...
if your perspective, or like, I don't know if you've ever noticed something that might be. I know it's a deep question, but it was just something I kind of wanted to touch on. But at least we understand each other in that way. But you see what I'm saying? The effort of and that pain to then still feed the monster, so to speak.
Yeah.
And put in, but instead, no, I'm gonna put working 2 jobs. I have that time. I'm gonna go to your school, and we're gonna talk to the kids together. We're gonna talk to the teachers together, and we're gonna sit there. And even though we might disagree, and boom, 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 boom. There's no violence there. There's nothing. We're going to spend 2 hours, 3 hours until we get to a certain quality of this real word compassion, and what that means, and how that quality of life is. It's not just a word I throw around. It's a quality that I step into. It's not an experience. It's a yeah.
Yeah, and that goes back.
It's worth saying. I would hope, but I didn't know if you had something to say regarding that, like why we have this wall up that we can't get past.
I think there's a lot of things. I don't know. I don't want to keep interrupting.
No. I was just going to say what Josh is kind of, leading right into is I know that part of your mission statement at CASA is seeing the person behind the behavior. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what it really speaks to. Demonstrate compassionate understanding of the experiences and the emotions of the person. And so, yes, I'm sure that you try to get parents on board with that, teachers on board with that, social workers on board with that. And is that kind of in line with what you do at CASA?
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely agree with that statement. And so, I would say one of the areas that I focus a lot in is trauma, and how does trauma affect people? How does it affect human behavior? How does it affect our thoughts? And so one of my favorite stories that I like to tell, just because it was really impactful for me and something that I've carried. And so during my master's degree, when I was getting my master's at Baylor, I was interning at a school in Houston. So it's in 3rd Ward, and that's a predominantly African-American community, low income, has a rich history in the civil rights movement, but even today, it's still a low income community where a lot of those children don't receive a quality education. They don't have all of their basic needs met. And here we have this private school in this area that exclusively serves children from low income families. And so predominantly, again, African-American students. And I was working with a 5-year-old. I was a school social worker, but just an intern at the time. And I was working with this 5-year-old who is in pre-K 4, so we already know that he has already been held back a grade, and we're just getting into pre-K, right? We're not even in first grade yet, and so here is this 5-year-old already being held back, sweetest kid, ever. And I'm observing his play. I'm working with him, just trying to understand. What is he carrying already as a 5-year-old, and how is that already impacting him? And so as I'm observing his play, his play, he was playing with dolls in his classroom, and his play was him coming in to rescue his mother from the domestic violence that she was experiencing at home. So we're already seeing how trauma and how violence and he was one of the students who would come in unbathed, clothes that were too small, no backpack, right? So we already know that he is in a hard situation, and then how does that impact him? And so one day, as I was in the classroom observing his play, he goes into the bathroom, because there's bathrooms inside the classroom because it's pre-K. And so there's, obviously private bathrooms, and he goes in and then he comes out, and then the teacher goes in just to check, and we discover that he's urinated all over the bathroom.
Oh, no.
And the teacher gets frustrated, takes all the kids out to recess, but is, and just points to me and goes, "I need you to deal with that." And my response was just, I got down on my knee, right? Because I don't want to create that barrier of, I'm better than you, or I'm the adult and I know what's right. I just wanted to understand, what happened to lead you to do this behavior, right? And, so I get down on my knee. He doesn't want to look me in the eye, right away. I'm like, just look at me, like, you're not in trouble. I just want to understand what happened. And, I didn't even take 30 seconds, and he eventually told me, well, someone called me nasty, right? So another little student in the class called him nasty. And his response was, because we're humans, right? And we have an activating event, right? Something happens, and that creates a thought in our head, and then that thought leads then to our behavior. So the activating event
showing
was
the brain and how powerful the brain is.
And how, right, and just how we're all just human. And his activating event was another student making fun of him. And so then he develops this belief that I'm nasty. I'm not worthy. I'm nasty. So if I'm nasty, then I'm going to do nasty things. And then that leads to him urinating all over the bathroom. And once you understand that, then what do you do besides just, encouraging him and saying, hey, that's not your identity. That's not who you are.
Compassion.
Yeah. And compassion is action, right? Sometimes we think compassion is just, I feel for you, or I understand, or I feel what you're feeling. But yes, it's those things, but it also leads to then doing something about it. And so then my encouragement, was then to talk to the teachers and have a better understanding of what's happening in the classroom, and what can we then do, what can we change in the classroom so that every student feels welcomed, loved, valued, and no one's bullying each other.
I think that's a marvelous story, because as we interact with people, we tend to stay stuck in that moment, especially with adults. You're like, why don't you know better? But we never go to the beginning and say, okay, well, first of all, I don't know nothing about how you were raised, but I'm capable, I'm aware, and I understand, and I know that how we are raised affects our upbringing. But again, something within humans, as we get older, we neglect all that. The atrophy, the attention span diminishes. And so when just like you said, when you look at everybody from the whole, I'm not looking at your life from this instant. I'm looking at understanding how you were raised, how you were probably ridiculed and beat up on as a kid because you came from a less income family. And I'm looking at all of that when I engage with everybody, to look at everybody from this word. When I say the whole, I want to not just interact with you in that moment, but for anybody, from murderers to rapists, from just I use those examples because those are the ones that we tend to have so much aggression and hate towards and say they should die. And we're not looking at, all right, we need to fix this problem is not to kill or to have death penalties or to go to war. It's to if I truly say I have compassion, I'm going to go to the very beginning. I'm going to make that effort to solely devote my my attention to this, which I want to clear. That doesn't mean that I live my life without, I live my life from disregarding things as far as what I enjoy or these kind of things, but I'm not chasing that. I'm actually chasing love. I'm actually chasing compassion. And in that way, there's that quality there where now when I look at you, when I look at anybody, I don't have an image to you. I don't say you are this. I say I'm just like you. And I look at the whole. I mean, yeah, so that was a great example, and I just wanted to clarify on that. So
yeah, and I think it's easy for us, when we're thinking about children in foster care, right? We know that they're in foster care because of allegations of abuse and neglect. I don't want that for anybody, whether it's a child or an adult. I would say it's easier for us to hold compassion for the children because we can look at them and say, well, they're just children. Yeah, they're innocent.
They haven't been corrupted with.
Yeah, whatever it is, and it is harder for us to hold compassion for the parents. But just like you were saying, Josh, we have to understand that they have their own trauma in their lives. And one thing we know about trauma is if we don't find healing and restoration from those things, we're actually stuck in at that age of development when we experience the trauma.
Oh, you're telling me. I feel like everybody's so childish.
Yeah.
With the way we bicker for the most part. I mean, even me, I'm going to always throw myself in the category because we're ordinary people too. But there is definitely the attention that I feel like that we've come together even to we're trying to hold attention to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, and when we hold attention to that, we hold space for people to just heal, right? That's what we want. We want people to be authentically themselves and to grow into who they want to be, not who I want you to be. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we bring our expectations of who other people should be instead of just letting them be who they want to be, with the hope that it is a person of compassion and integrity and love, right? We're chasing those things.
Those expectations we put on other people, we always fall short of those. I mean, to say somebody's this and that I'm not that, to separate myself from that is ridiculous. Like, you're a human being too. Like watch yourself just as much. And when you do that, I think it just dissolves this judgment of people, because we're in the society, we're in the world. How are you going to escape that? How are you going to say I don't pay taxes to the government that goes to war? How are you going to say that I'm still involved in this petty political thing of Democrat, Republican, and all these sides, this division, this split? You are a part of that. So, these expectations, we all fall short, and admitting that is just the first step to start dissolving what I want to say, like this becoming. I want this world to become this. And we want unity. We all want that. We want compassion. We want to find love, but we get stuck in, all right, I'm doing something you're not doing, and I have compassion and you don't, and it's like, oh my. That's childish. I'm this, you're that. This is mine, this is yours.
I'm curious. What happened to the little boy?
I wish I could say. All I know is that I cried so much when my internship came to an end. He even drew me. All of my students came together and drew pictures of me that my supervisor put together in a little booklet, and he was the one who gave it to me.
Oh my!
It was so sweet.
You still have it,
yes,
right?
I still have it.
Cherish it.
I still have it.
So, those experiences in Houston and those experiences growing up, where it sounds like you were just immersed in a culture of serving others. Are these the types of things that really influenced you to go to work for CASA?
Mm-hmm. I would definitely say so. I think just the values and the relational, aspects of my family, are what I still carry today. And, in serving and loving other people, it's what motivates me to do anything and everything that I do. And so, thankful for the opportunity to be a part of CASA and, to continue that through the people that, I serve as well.
And for the people who don't know, because I keep saying, we're saying CASA, for the people who don't know what CASA is and what they do, can you just briefly explain a little bit about what CASA is and what it does?
Definitely. So CASA McLennan County is a local program. And so there's a national CASA as well as a Texas CASA. And so we serve under both of those branches or, programs, but there's a lot of local programs in different counties. And so COSTA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. And so what that means is that, a judge will appoint us on cases of abuse and neglect to be an advocate for the children involved in that case. But with that comes the responsibility of, working with the families, working with the other professionals, working alongside CPS, working alongside judges, working alongside lawyers, working alongside anyone who's involved in this child's life to find the best permanent place for them, whether that be foster care, whether that be returning to their families, whatever it is, what's the best option. And we're going to do that with the child and their families and not for them, but without ever talking to them. That doesn't work.
That's good. So they're an integral part of the decision-making process. I saw here that, I don't know if this is correct, there are 700 children in foster care in McLennan County alone.
There are a lot of children. You wouldn't think so, but yes. And then, if you add on to that, just children experiencing homelessness and just a lot of other, really hard things. We have a lot of vulnerable children in our community.
We got to step up our compassion.
Definitely.
So how does that work? So you got 700 kids, and you're saying with all those kids, there's this constant. They're going back and forth, talking to lawyers and the judges, or I guess there's paperwork. I'm trying to get a little bit more specific of understanding. Like, how does that all? That seems like.
Yeah, so
a really daunting task to.
Yeah, and so we don't. McLennan County doesn't serve all 700 children. We would love to. We need more volunteers to be able to do that.
Make your plug.
So definitely reach out to us if you would like to volunteer.
Can you touch on that? Like, what would a volunteer do? I come to you and. What am I doing?
You're the one who's working. You're the advocate for the child.
Oh, and you're going to the judge and
yeah, you're going to the court.
So then it's my job to get to know that kid as much as possible. Mm-hmm. Is that just through interactions, or is there paperwork that kind of describes the kid's personality?
Yeah, so you'll do case notes, and you'll be assigned a supervisor who will work with you, guide you through the entire process. So you're not by yourself, but you as the advocate would be the one who's meeting with children on a monthly basis, just getting to know
with
them.
The counselor or with the other person that you just mentioned?
The supervisor?
Yeah, the supervisor.
You can't. Yeah, they're more than welcome to come. It just depends on your comfortability.
Is that done there at the CASA, like in a room, or is that something that's done?
So you'd usually go out to the child and the family.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's advocacy work. And so
that's cool.
Going out into the community, getting to know the children, just understanding who they are, what they like, and what do they want. And then advocating for those desires on behalf of the child and with the child in court, in meetings and different things, along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm still toying with the idea of being a CASA volunteer.
Definitely.
I mean, it just seems like what you're doing is so necessary, and it's such good work. Do you have any success stories you can share?
I don't think we can share them, but we do have success stories. And one of my favorite aspects was just this Christmas, being able to have a lot of different people in our community coming together to donate Christmas gifts to the children that we're serving. So we were able to gather the Christmas lists of the children that we're serving, send them out to the volunteers who would then go purchase those and bring them back wrapped, and then we would go and deliver them, to them at, their placements. And it was just really exciting. And I don't have any cases on my caseload because I supervise the supervisors. But I got to take some Christmas gifts to one of the children that we served. And it was just such a sweet, happy moment. So.
See, that's a success story.
Yeah.
You made that child's day. We're not asking for names or anything here.
So for someone like me that maybe is just real busy, but I do want to understand more of this because I want to understand that this whole just conflict within this that happens. Is there a way that I could kind of come in and more, like maybe I'm just really busy with life and things like that. So I guess, to be a volunteer, but to not take on that role of, because it would seem very daunting. I mean, as you've explained it, like, okay, if I'm going to volunteer, it seems like a lot of load that I have to take on, but I do want to still expose myself to that. I'm going to use the word suffering, but that actually goes on in the world, instead of, we tend to really get, I think the brain, it's just surviving it. It pushes out all that's going on. So without being aware of that, how am I supposed to have the compassion to act? And so is there something that I could do from that to where I could understand more about?
Definitely. So we actually are hoping and are to start what we're going to call the ambassador program, to where if an individual just doesn't have enough time to, be responsible. And I will say we only assign one case to an advocate. So it's not like you're going to come in and volunteer with us and have 10 cases on your caseload.
Wow.
Because it is a volunteer. We recognize it's volunteer-based program. And so, but with that, the ambassador program would be getting more involved, but maybe you can help us, staff a table at an event, once every couple months, learn more about our organization.
And I could still get to know the kids and
you wouldn't
the circumstance, or maybe I would still be somehow able to, I guess, talk to you and talk to people about those circumstances that are going on.
And just getting a better understanding of
the trauma
foster care.
and awesome.
So it sounds like there's a lot of volunteer opportunities.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I do know one thing about the advocates, because I looked into it a little bit a few years back. They get extensive training.
Yes.
You just don't throw people into the court system.
Definitely not.
Kids.
And I as a social worker would not agree with that if that happened.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
They do receive 30 hours, and it has to be complete before they can even come into contact with a child. They have to complete 30 hours prior to starting their advocacy work, and then maintain 12 hours of a continuing education every year.
I would consider that for somebody that's truly serious about finding out what love, finding out what compassion is, to take that step for that 30 hours. Because look, it's 30 hours. I'm pretty sure it's not like you got to do this 30 hours within 2 weeks or there's probably some timeline.
There's a timeline,
but you still have
it's not
a couple
within 2 days.
Yeah.
No.
What is the timeline?
Well,
the most that I could.
Well, it's scheduled, and so it's about 2 hours once a week for a couple of weeks.
I would encourage that, because please, if you somehow just feel like I'm trying to be attentive of this, but I just my day, my kids, everything's. I just know that there's something there that's kind of prohibiting me from that. Well, then boom, here's your community. Here's an excellent way to put that attention in your brain, and to say this is a real thing going on, and it's happening everywhere in the world, and your kids aren't safe, because then there's no security in this world when we're perpetuating the same things. When I ignore the problem and I try to do everything I can to say my kids are the most important thing, but then again, wars can come around. Sex trafficking is a thing. So how am I actually trying to solve the problem, instead of just saying, well, I'm just gonna isolate myself here, but I say that I love and I have compassion. But so here's a way. Yeah.
Volunteer for CASA.
Somehow
Definitely
put yourself in a situation where the suffering is in your face. Boom.
Exactly.
This is the world that your kids are living in, and you're not solving the problem by ignoring it, or by saying I have a gun and I'm going to protect my kids at all costs. Like you're perpetuating the violence.
And something we don't, fully understand, especially when we're thinking about trafficking, is sometimes we think trafficking. You have to be taken across what we've already said, state lines or across country lines, when I know of children who have been trafficked in their own homes, right? Because they build this trauma bond with the perpetrator, and that person is able then to convince that, individual to engage in pornography in their own room, right?
You said it, because they feel like they are that. Like the parents already told them, or they feel like that's who they are. Like you said with the kid, they called him disgusting, so he peed out. Their brains are so moldable at that age, so you can't blame the kid or say that, well, why don't they do something? they can't. They don't know better. They just like all of us.
And
even adults don't know
better. They're just
better.
looking for love and, you know, friendship somewhere. And this person came in, you know, pretending to be what they wanted when they had an intention the entire time.
It's so hard to find honesty and truth. And we end up finding it in places that don't even have it. And that's just the way our brains are.
Yeah. I have a question. This all brings it up, you know. You're dealing with parents and parents that are really messed up. Do you find it difficult to show compassion to difficult people?
For me, I would say no.
Great answer. Because I would say then the compassion can't be there if you find it difficult.
But I will say that it happens. You know, it can happen in. It can happen, but I would say that it's not difficult for me. Again, I think it just ties back to how I was raised and just understanding that there's more going on than I can even just see, and just the values, you know, that my family instilled in me of just treating people as people and just understanding we've all gone through hard things.
I think when you say that, you're showing how that we are human. Okay, so you might have a natural response to a parent that's done this abuse to a kid, but now you also have this, I think, this quality of compassion that just overshadows that, and you know that, okay, I'm a human. I have thoughts. I have tendencies. I have biological feelings to want to react, but when I really have compassion and love, that overshadows that, and so I don't. There's not a knowing better. There's just like compassion is there.
Yeah,
and so
it can get hard. You know, one of the clients I've worked with literally cussed me out for like 30 minutes on the phone. And that was hard. It wasn't here. It wasn't at Casa McLennan County, you know, but that was hard. And I had to stop, go for a walk, and then say, I'm not in it for me. I'm in it, you know, to help and to serve and to care for other people. And so I still showed up. I could have made the choice to not show up, but I don't think that would have, you know, aligned with, you know, with who I say I want to be. And sometimes we do have to make, you know, choices that, you know, are hard, but they're for the better, and maybe not for the betterment of myself, but for other people.
Well, and that brings me to another question. I was reading that compassion literally means to suffer together. So you're suffering alongside someone else. So how does that affect you personally? I mean, your mental and physical health. How do you stay healthy when you're being compassionate towards others?
Definitely. I think everyone, self-care is different for everyone, but I definitely think it's important. It's important to understand our boundaries and to name our boundaries. And so something that I definitely do is, you know, turning to fitness. Trauma lives in our bodies, right? And so whether or not that's the trauma that I've experienced or it's the secondary trauma that I'm experiencing from, you know, the stories that I'm hearing or the people that I'm serving with, we store that trauma in our bodies. And so, you know, one way, you know, to release that is just through exercise and through fitness. And so for me, that has been helpful for me. I also ride a lot, and, you know, just spending time with people who, you know, who know what I do, but we don't have to talk about that. We can just be silly and laugh and, you know, do different things. And so I definitely think you have to just understand who you are and what brings life for you, and just make sure that you're engaging in those activities.
Okay. Well, good. Sounds like you've got it going on there.
I work out a lot. So.
Yeah. And so, do you have a story from your past, that anybody that like stands out to you that was just extremely compassionate to you and really helped you?
Yeah, I would definitely, you know, say my mom, probably the best woman ever in the whole world. But, you know, she laid down her life for me. And, you know, I wouldn't be here today, you know, where I am. I wouldn't have gone to high school, to Baylor if it wasn't for her sacrifices.
Yeah. And so she really was a true model of love and compassion.
Yeah.
And so to have somebody like that in your life, I'm sure she has a huge influence on your direction.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Okay. Well, good.
What about y'all?
Compassion.
Yeah, role model, someone you look up to.
You know, I'm going to have to probably say, my mother as well. She was the most patient and kind, gentle person, and was always very accepting, very loving. And it had a huge impact, of course, on me growing up. And it provided a role model, an excellent role model for, if you want to be a good and compassionate woman, mother, then this is a good way to do it. So yeah,
That's
yay.
amazing.
Yay, moms!
Yay! What about you?
Y'all want to go down there with me?
Yeah, compassionate people in your life.
To talk about compassion, I would talk about more. I guess look at compassion as a certain quality, and with compassion, I just know that there can't be compassion if there's a cause. I'm compassionate because this. Compassion has no anchor to anything. So I don't say I am whatever that is to me. I mean, it can be anything. I'm this, so I'm compassionate. I study this, so I'm compassionate. And so it's hard to really. I mean, I could give you some. I'm going to use the word superficial answer in my perspective of someone that's compassionate, but to look at someone's whole life, I mean, yeah, like my mom's compassionate towards me, but do I feel like she has a quality of compassion with what that word really means, like a quality of love and what that really means in it? And it's easy for parents to show that just to us, but if we limit it and say, I have compassion for my kids, you know, it's hard to put into words, but I feel like compassion and love is definitely a quality of a movement with everything. There's not a certain action or to say, to limit that compassion to your kid. If you're going to have a compassion with your kid, then what is limiting us to have that compassion for everybody that we see? Because so when I see my kid, I understand that I want to do what's best for my kid. I see that the kid, my son or daughter, has certain angst with the world, certain anxieties with the world. And so if I want to try to solve that within my children, then I need to expound that to the whole world and say, okay, then this is not just something that I feel for my kids. I feel this for everybody, because then compassion, it for me, that quality, that movement can't ever exist. It can't ever flourish. It won't ever flower, because we're always just limiting every single thing. The word love, the word compassion, all these words turn into just words, and they don't turn into, hey, there's something deeper, a deeper movement, a different quality here that's total honesty with the way things are. There's not some kind of story I'm trying to tell you to make you feel better. There's honesty with, hey, people are violent, so yeah, I'm not putting my trust in people. I'm going to show total responsibility to myself, and I'm going to make sure that, although I have a great relationship with my kids, that I'm not still gossiping over here or saying that we're Americans, and for an example, and you know, those are radicals, but they're fighting for their family too. So we're all in this quality that I can't say is fully flourishing into this movement of compassion, and not just a word or a definition or again, a cause. And so I would say compassion is my example of compassion. So to investigate that and to not put that necessarily on a human being, because all of us, myself included, just with the brain, we limit that. And unless there's a very serious inquiring into, okay, I see that, I say I have compassion, but the world is full of conflict, and I still have anger with my kids and frustration with my kids. So compassion can't exist with anger and with frustration. And we've been so conditioned to have that quality. And so I just ask, is there a different quality of that compassion, a different way of thinking about it, a different way of approaching the problem that's, like you said earlier, where we approach problems with value and with money, and because it's so easy, and it's so easy to feel something from that, and compassion can't be a feeling neither, because it ruins the whole thing. So it's a quality of movement. It's a very serious undertaking of, I'm going to find out. I'm not going to run away from suffering. I'm going to be aware of it constantly. And do people have glimpses of compassion? Yes, but it's very serious that we also say, I don't know what compassion is. Just like now, we come together to inquire, and although we've entertained certain words here and we show glimpses of compassion, to say, I'm coming to the table saying, I don't know what compassion is, and I want to come together with you. I want to come together with more people and investigate together, and I'll stop talking. Yes.
So now we know what Josh thinks about compassion.
Yeah.
That's what this podcast is all about. So what are, moving along, what are your thoughts if you had to try and define what compassion is to you, just kind of a working definition?
Well, it was exactly what you shared up earlier, to suffer with, that leads to action, right? And so, compassion is, suffering with someone else, and not necessarily, because sometimes I don't think we can actually ever truly understand, what someone else is going through, but we can listen and, and we can hope, do something about it, whether that's, advocating on their behalf, or whether that's just being a listening ear. We're being moved, by that suffering, to action.
Which brings me to something called a compassion collapse. I was watching the news this morning, and this volcano just exploded on this little island, Togo. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was magnificent. It was this underwater volcano. It was just, this big explosion, leveled the town. It's isolated. Nobody can get to them right now to give them food, water, whatever. People have died. And and I'm talking about myself here. I'm sitting here watching the news this morning, eating my cereal, drinking my coffee, and thinking, well, that's really too bad. I'm sorry to hear that. Togo's so far away. This is just too much. It's just too overwhelming. And we tend to be less likely to help in situations like that, these tsunamis or natural disasters or whatever, because there's just too much need. Do you ever run into anything like that when you just look at all of the children that need all this help, that sometimes it's too much?
Yes, I can get overwhelmed pretty easily. That's what researchers and really smart people have, called compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
And so definitely just would encourage people to understand what that truly is, understand what compassion fatigue is, understand what leads to it, understand what burnout is, especially if you are in a helping profession, right? Because we can say the same thing with our experiences with COVID. It's just too much.
Ooh, good example.
It's too much, and I just can't, right? And so that's a phrase that I would say, I can't do that right now. And that's okay. It's okay for us to recognize our boundaries. I got to that point with different aspects, with different opportunities that I've been doing of just, I don't know if I can, do this anymore. And you just have to take care of yourself, take care of your boundaries. I took a break for 4 months, and then I was like, I got to get back in there, I don't know where that, where that's from. If that was just, I just needed a 4-month break, where that's all I did for 4 months was work out, right? So
You're working it out.
Yeah. I just took the little break that I needed. Right. We have to find our own ways of helping. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to, sometimes it's easy for us to look at maybe someone else and say, I should be there, right? My life should look like theirs. My standing in whatever job I have should be higher, than it is, whatever it is, right? We're comparing, when in reality, just stop comparing ourselves, or stop wanting someone else's life and just live your own. and do what you can do. You know, I talk to some people who are like, I can never do, you know, what you do. And I'm like, well, you don't have to, because that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, I'm
you know?
doing it.
Yeah. You know, and some people, you know, will say, I can never do this or do that. Well, do what you can do, whether that is, you know, as Josh was saying earlier, I don't have enough time.
He's going to be a CASA volunteer.
Yeah, I don't have enough time to be an advocate. Can I be an ambassador? Well, yes, right? There's no, I'm not more valuable than someone else just because I'm the program director, or just because, you know, whatever it is. We're all valuable. And you're bringing what you have to the table, and that's important too. Because
when you say something like that, first I would be aware that people are capable of helping themselves. So to then take on this responsibility that I'm over here and I have to, I mean, the fact that we're aware of what's going on in the world, that's one thing. So I would ask, well, then why aren't we united, not necessarily worldwide, but in my community? And then also to be aware that, am I feeling pity for those people or sympathy, which is not compassion? I mean, that's a big thing, but don't pity somebody. That's not compassion. And to be aware that people are strong and resilient. So yes, that's going on. It's unfortunate, but I don't feel this overwhelming need of suffering or this overwhelming feeling of I wish I had magical powers. There's just there's just me being in the moment, and I feel that conflict. I mean, I feel that I think maybe what hurts people most is that guilt that deep down we're not being united just in my community, and really that's all you should be aware of, because I mean, what can you do? And to look at the facts of that, yeah, I can't go over there. So it's not that I'm not concerned with that. To be concerned with that is to be concerned now, like with myself, with my responsibility, and with how I'm I don't want to use the word helping my community, but how am I going through my community, again, with no images about people, with no judgments about people, with not putting some fake, because what you think about somebody is never really the case. Everybody can put on, the strongest man can put on this persona and be an MMA fighter, but they suffer too. They have embarrassment too. And so to look at everybody from that view, we're all the same in that situation, in that sense. And then what will that do to you when you're saying, all right, I'm really serious about compassion, and okay, there's worldwide events that go on. Is that guilt within inside me because I am perpetuating that in some way? You know, it takes hardcore magnifying of yourself, and of you know, not going to these studies of rats and monkeys, but study yourself, study people, study what's going on, and just watch that you are not being a hypocrite, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, and you keep talking about, Josh, you keep talking about a connection between compassion and personal responsibility. So either one of you, do you think there's this connection between personal responsibility and compassion?
That could be real confusing. Yeah, because well, I think because people, when they hear responsibility, it's like, okay, I need to go out, I need to make more money. Then I need to be responsible to these chores that society has put in, and that's something that I also look at too. To say that it's unfortunate that somehow man has built these societies because we can't govern ourselves. So we have a certain society that then puts a certain way that you have to act. I have to go out and make a living. I have to study for a career. So to then feel guilty that I can't somehow save the world, you're not looking at the fact of what is. And then to say, okay, I'm going to take that responsibility to not put my needs on the government, not to put my needs on somebody else. I'm totally capable, and I'm already self-fulfilled now. I don't need somebody to fulfill me. I don't need a child. You know, it's amazing. Everybody feels, I have to always say this, everybody feels like they have to have a kid. And why does everybody have to feel like, because it's not my kid? There's plenty of kids here. There's CASA right here. So you feel unfulfilled because you don't have a kid. Don't go out and try to make babies. Because to say that's my kid is even unfair, because, okay, you had that kid, but that's a human being. That's not your kid. So that's already an illusion that your brain has perpetuated. And then saying your kid, you have possession with that kid, you're trying to run their life. That's a human being. So if I look at everything like that and I get rid of this whole, or I find out the true meaning of family, which everybody would agree it's not blood. Family is it's deeper than that. And so if I can believe that, then the kids at CASA, they're no different than a kid you had the other way. with the boom boom chupa choom.
Yeah.
So you know, but so please, like, yeah. So that responsibility of what's the meaning of family? What's the meaning of love? What is that? That it's not the word. It's you can't. I mean, we try to describe it here, but it's a quality of movement in life. And yes.
To me, I think it speaks to personal responsibility, and like you were talking about just a few minutes ago about boundaries. And okay, if I'm a responsible person and I'm responsible for myself, should I be, reaching out to people? Should I be being compassionate to others? Or should I just be, a good person and just go through life and not really worry about it? I mean, do you think that we should all show a little bit more compassion towards others? I have a feeling your answer will be yes. Yeah, but
my answer is we could. I really try to refrain from using words like should or, asking questions such as why questions, because I think sometimes that perpetuates shame, like you should do this or you should know
superiority.
better.
I know better than you. I'm trying to help you out.
And so we could, right, at that moment, I could have shown more compassion, but I try to also not to use the word but too.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's hard. And at that moment, I just did what I thought. I just did what was I thought was the best thing to do at that time. Maybe it wasn't really the best thing to do, but at that time I thought it was. And so that's something that a lot of people have, and that doesn't come from me. That has been a lot of really amazing social workers and mentors that I've had who have, guided me in that direction of, avoiding, some words, especially, working with, clients and people who are coming through hard situations of, I don't want to be another perpetuator of shame and guilt and pain in your life. And so, but to answer your question, I definitely think we could show more compassion. And one of my favorite quotes, and I'm forgetting the name because I always get nervous when I'm on the spot, was, you can choose to look the other way, but you can never say that you didn't know. And so,
I like that.
And that was one of the quotes. I was, had the privilege of actually teaching my first social work course this past semester at Baylor.
Oh, good for you.
I know. I loved it.
Exciting.
And, teaching my students of, just get out there, kind of, some of the things that we even shared earlier in this podcast was just, I want them to just get out there, just serve, get around people that are different from you, get around circumstances you've never experienced, and just learn and recognize we're all, at the end of the day, and I think what Josh is trying to get to is we're all human beings, and really we're all just one big family. So why are we withholding resources from other people? Why are we creating boundaries? Why are we dividing, separating, when in reality we're way more similar than we realize? And we all care about the same things. We all care about our families. We all care about the people that we care about, right? And even when we're thinking about, individuals who maybe we might hold less compassion for, right? So, if we're thinking about people who have committed crimes, right? I try to avoid using words like, well, you're a criminal, right? You're just an individual who experienced a hard thing and at, one moment committed a crime.
It's the
but you're
brain.
not a criminal.
It's not your actual being, or if you want to use this word soul, it's not that. It's not. I mean, we all come from nothingness. We all come from the infinite, whatever label you want to put on it. But you come from that, and that's how I look at you. I don't look at you from the brain conditioning and from the trauma and these things that I know you act from, but you're not really that. And you have so much anger, or you have so much. The brain is just so powerful. So when I can first understand how my brain has that control, I mean, that's something to first understand with people, instead of, always going through a class of compassion or a class of something. Let's understand the brain first, just real quick, and then let's move from there. So that way, that you're able to watch yourself.
Yeah, you're able to catch your own biases. You're able to catch your own.
And look at people from that. Yeah, it's so easy to be your brain, to be that, but that's not what people are. So look at them from that soul, if you want to call it, just to put a word on that, where we really come from, to say you're a child of God, a child of this intelligence that has made the world, that has made the grass, the trees, and we're here together to just live together. And that's where it ends. To try to find my purpose creates conflict. Your purpose is just to move and to use people as far as we help each. I hate the word help too, but we're
in it together.
We're working together.
We're
yeah.
in it together.
I just always use that analogy of, we have microbiomes. We have living things inside of our body. Those living things, the trees, those living things don't have these opinions and these ideas. They're just here to make the whole system not even work, because these words start to, I think, really put certain ideas in people's heads. But you're just here to move, enjoy quality of life, and just watch yourself, that you're not always adding and adding and adding. And I need to add a dog. I got a house. I need a better house. I need to add more air conditioner. I need to add. So the brain is already adding something. So can I see that and stop that and know that I'm fulfilled now? I don't need somebody else. I don't need a wife. You don't need those things. Doesn't mean that if it comes along, it just happens. But to say that to say that you're not enough, and that I need a dog because I'm lonely, or you know what I'm saying? Like, now you're letting the brain kind of take over in those moments, because you are enough, and it gets all into that kind of thing. But that's true facts. I'm not trying to make anybody feel better. You are enough. You have intelligence inside of you that built the universe, and that's a fact. You came from that. And so however you try to start labeling it, what are you searching for? I mean, it's there, and it's over with, and I'm complete right now.
We are. Yes. I have a kind of a little bit different turn I want to take at this point. And
That's
I mean, maybe you've, seen this in other places. I don't think it's necessarily relates to CASA, but have you ever, and I mean, this is an ugly term, but have you ever heard of white savior syndrome?
I have.
Okay.
Yes.
Where, you've got, unfortunately, a lot of religious organizations are guilty of this, where you get a lot of people that go on voluntourism, and they go in and their hearts are in the right place. They're really trying to show compassion, and they, but we know better. We don't have a lot of skills to really help you, but we're going to go down to Togo with the volcano that just exploded. And even though I don't know how to build a house, I'm still going to go down there and, love on your babies, or, have a Bible school, or whatever it is. And it's just kind of almost this knee-jerk reaction of a person's, I think their hearts are in the right place, but are they doing more harm than good? And have you ever run into any situations like that? I kind of wanted to bring that up.
Definitely. I would say yes, I have, unfortunately. And I would say, it's easier. It happens more often than we think, Yeah, I would say it happens in missions work. It happens in just service, whether that's, faith-based, or whether, you're not necessarily going with a church or with like a missions, focus group, maybe you're going with Red Cross, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not throwing Red Cross under the bus.
Yeah, really.
That was just a
Apologies,
thought. Yeah.
Red Cross.
Please do not think that that's what I just did. But I do think people, sign up, with good intentions of the heart, to serve. But don't like that word.
Mm-hmm.
It can happen where, you're just not maybe you don't have the skill set, that you need to truly help someone walk through the trauma that they just experienced. That doesn't necessarily mean, right, there's just so many different things that can come into play in situations like that. And so this is just my personal opinion. Other people can have different, thoughts, and that's okay. I don't necessarily agree with short-term missions. if there's not a long-standing thing that's going to stay after you leave.
Right.
Because I just don't think, I think that is more harmful than it is helpful, especially if we're only going after one thing. We can say that we're here to serve, but if we're serving to get someone to believe what we believe, I don't think that's love.
Yeah, watching that, or is it superiority? I know better than you. I'm gonna come over here and tell you something because you're doing it all wrong, or guilt. And those people with the volcano probably we can take care of ourselves. And now here comes quote unquote Americans. I'm not gonna say any races, but here comes the Americans, and they have motives, and they're trying to make us Democratic or they're trying to make us Christian. They're gonna help us, but we know that they're coming down here to make themselves feel better, and we can take care of ourselves. And so coming from a place of guilt or coming from a place of I know better than you. When you know that's going on, then I get into this whole line of the art of questioning. Then I'm going to question that. And when the church says or whoever says we're going to go take a stand and fight the good fight, it's like I'm going to sit back and question that and be like, is that actually necessary? And because, is it more harm than good? What are we trying to change? I mean, why do people don't like to be changed? Who likes to have somebody constantly, I don't ask for a bottle of water, but I'm giving you a bottle of water. I'm giving you food. I'm like, I'm not hungry. Stop giving me stuff. I don't need your quote unquote help. And that's what I think that's what that white support, whatever you said.
Yeah, no. Yeah, and so
well, and I can give a specific example. With that, there are instances where people do need help, but when it comes to the point where I'm saying, because I've served as an emergency aid worker, I was saying that earlier, amongst refugees. And I just remember, and this is where I got solidified. So I am a Christian and I believe in Jesus, but I'm not going to impose my beliefs on somebody else, especially when I'm coming into their most vulnerable situation. Like that's just, for me, that's just not, the time to do that. But I would watch my teammates, right? We all signed up to serve and to give food and to walk with these individuals. And yet I would watch my teammates. If someone didn't accept Jesus, they never went back to their tent.
Oh.
And to me, that's not compassion. And that's just wanting to impose your own beliefs on somebody where they're living in a tent in a country that they don't speak the language, they've never been to, and they're just living in a tent, right? Like they do need help. They don't have documentation, whatever it is. They're fleeing violence. Right? The people I served watched different groups literally murder their family members right in front of them, right? So like I'm not talking as if I don't know what I'm talking about. Like I've been with people in their most vulnerable, hardest situations, and not once did I ever try to impose anything on them. If they just wanted to sit and cry, we literally would weep at the top of our lungs together because that's what they needed to heal and to grieve their experiences, right? I wasn't there to say my way of belief needs to be your way to find healing.
Or my way of anything.
I'm just here for you.
Yeah.
What do you need? And let's do that together.
You know what? I think that's the key in situations like that. Instead of coming in and assuming you know what they need, you go in and you ask them.
Yeah.
What do you need?
Yeah.
What can I do for you?
And sometimes that is. And I'm not, because I believe in let's go and let's serve, especially in times of crisis, right? I want to be a responder to tsunamis. I want to be a responder to volcanoes, school shootings. I hope those, these things don't happen, but they might. And I want to be someone who responds to those situations, but I want to do it in the way that is helpful for that individual and is not helpful for me. I'm not in it for me, right? If I want to get something out of it, then it's not compassion.
Yeah. Yeah. First, do no harm.
And what we would say, because we use this word need, and then it carries a lot of, I use the word tradition or definition to different people, but are you saying, maybe not all of it, because some places, in Africa, I'm assuming, but there's some places where food is not as scarce, but for the most part, all of our problems psychological. So what people really need is some kind of ground to talk to you as a human being, and I mean, it's hard to find the words, but I was into therapy. Is that what people need? It's a psychological, our psyche is so messed up, and we're always on this pattern of moving away from trying to become something. And there's not just and some people, of course, there's people with the trauma, but is the right way to solve this almost to, I think some people tend to think that we're on a search for, I don't want to have the trauma, or I want to be without the trauma and the memories, but those are already biologically in you. Now, the question is, if we start working together psychologically, can over the years those start to fade? But can I work with those? You mentioned it earlier with something, but just to recognize those are always going to be there. And is there something bigger that can overshadow that to make you have comfort in that moment, or to realize that, okay, that's not me. The trauma's coming up, the PTSD's coming up, but I'm also, now that I've went through it with people, I'm also aware that there's something bigger. I'm part of this infiniteness. I just got to go right into it. I'm part of this infiniteness, and that intelligence that has grown everything. It's unfortunate that humans have built these societies and these things that cause us to suffer, and this confusion that causes the trauma. But to see it as that, and have that compassion to see within myself that it's not no fault of my own, or this is not who I am. Those are things that I went through, but who I really am is this this intelligence that and can I move out of the way and let that intelligence make these decisions instead of me feeling like I have to make the decisions, which, then you got to question, you got to more talk to people about who they really are. And I mean, grieve with them and those sorts of things. But there's also, food doesn't solve the problem. Money doesn't solve the problem. Us saying we're totally human beings. And when I talk to you, I'm not going to talk to you with trying to impose some kind of idea or some kind of religion. I'm talking to you as a human being. And I want to more talk about, I think people make these abstractions. I want to talk to you about Jesus, but we're really saying, I want to talk to you about intelligence, about love, about the same quality that's built everything is within us. And I want to talk to you from there and show you that, you can't rely on people. People right now, they are violent. They are these things. So to think that you're suffering because your wife kicked you out, and that every time you talk to her, she's mistrustful and she always brings these things up, be like, go into it knowing that you can't change that about her. She is mistrustful and she is these things. So when you talk to her, if you have those moments to talk together again, how are you going to do it differently? And we have all this time on our hands. We watch TV and we fill ourselves with entertainment, and we don't sit down and say, I want to find out what love is. I want to find out what compassion is. I want to be so self-sustainable that I don't need nothing in my life. I need food. I need water. Yeah. But I don't need somebody to fill that void for me.
I think there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
And I want to have a few. No, that's great. I have a few responses, but I would encourage you to continue reading and continue exploring, because as you're talking, I'm hearing this theory pop up.
Well, I guess the main thing is I'm not trying to get rid of the trauma. I'm trying to learn how to find some quality of this word love that can overshadow that. So when that comes up, there's not this sense of, oh, that's me and my life sucks. My life's
definitely.
over.
And and one thing I definitely agree with and have been taught is separating people from the problems, right? And so I think oftentimes, just in, how we create systems and how we create organizations and even just when we have a lack of compassion, what's happening is that we're saying you're the problem, when in reality, they're not the problem, right? The problem's the problem, whatever it is, poverty, hunger, racism,
society.
The problem is the problem. The people are still people. So how do we separate those things? And, I would actually probably disagree with Josh, you saying we can't change people, because that is the basis of
I said like over a couple
work.
of years or something like that. But
I
to show people
change.
that there's not an instant like, oh, my trauma's gone, or my habit of energy drinks is gone. I mean, to show that root level in everything we do. You're not trying to go find religion to get rid of your thoughts or whatever. You're trying to find a quality of love that just is bigger than all of that. Yeah. So you move from that.
And so just a theory that I, have based a lot of my work around is from a licensed professional counselor named Bonnie Martin. And she's amazing, very intelligent, but she has this theory. And again, there's many different theories out there. And so that's why I'm just encouraging you to go and learn. But one of the theories I based a lot of my work around is her theory around human behavior, and her, sharing that there's only 3 motivators of human behavior, right? And so those are to avoid pain, right? As human beings, we avoid pain, like we just want to. And it's something that is taught in our media. It's taught in everything. Avoid pain, stuff your emotions, blah, 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 blah. Avoid pain, experience connection, and experience pleasure, right? That these are the 3 things that are motivating us. And so when we look at an individual and, and this is, what I would teach a lot, I don't ever have to ask a survivor of human trafficking, why did you stay? That's a question always someone will ask the survivor, why did you stay with that person? Why did you stay with your perpetrator? First of all, we don't want to ask why questions, right? Because they bring about shame. And second of all, we don't actually have to ask them those questions if we understand what motivates human behavior. You stayed because that person has confused you with love and violence. And so, yeah, it was really, really hard at some points. But then at other points, that individual actually, showed you, maybe showered you in love. And that's what that's what you're trying to hold on to, is maybe those small moments of love that you experience, because maybe you've never experienced those anywhere else. When we understand, when we don't ever have to ask a person a question, why are you still using drugs, right? Because we understand that drugs activate the pleasure centers in our brains, and we just want to continue feeling pleasure, right? And so I think sometimes we ask a lot of questions of why, when in reality we're all just human, and we're all motivated by the same things. Even if I don't necessarily agree with what you did or didn't do, I can understand it because I can understand what is motivating human behavior.
I think that's a good place to almost start wrapping it up, because what you just said, finally, this is what's good about talking with people. You get to a place of, that's compassion, study yourself. And stop, when I study myself and I see these motives within myself, do I drop those motives? And then when I see somebody else, you understand those motives within them. So we're getting now to that. This is what I wanted to do and put into words: compassion, that responsibility to myself, to study myself, and not to go to research and say, this is what the monkeys do, and this is what rats do, and this is the behavior of that, but to look at myself first. And then when I see that I run from pain and that I'm always chasing pleasure, then drop it. Stop chasing pleasure. You can stop having motives when you live life. Within myself, I study myself. I see these things that create this conflict, and so then I drop it. I don't expect others to drop it because I'm aware of that within them. So now when I talk to people from compassion, from studying myself, and then dropping these things that I see perpetuate conflict, the need to always want more and so on, I can now communicate with somebody from a place of, people feel that I don't have any motive trying to help you. I don't have any motive trying to do anything for you. Somehow we've crossed paths, and I'm in a situation, I'm in a social worker position, I'm in just an ordinary guy position, and when I cross paths, and I'm not going out trying to talk to every homeless person, but if a homeless person waves me down, I don't have a fear or an image. I've already studied myself enough to realize these automatic responses that pop up. And so that's what I would love to start wrapping it up with that. Study yourself, study your responses, look at the outward, and study people, and study, if that's the right word, and then from there, are you willing to just drop it and be, everything you do is totally unselfish? I'm not helping you because I'm looking for fulfillment. I'm not helping you for this. We've crossed paths, and now I'm talking to you as a human being because I've already studied myself. So I know what compassion is in a certain capability. Compassion, because I know compassion is just a human word that to find out if things exist, I always look at, if you take humans away, does it still exist? These words, compassion and love. And I would say yes. And then modeling my behavior from that. Love is without cause. Love is without motive. Love is totally unselfish. So great. I like the way this all kind of culminated too.
Yeah. Well, my takeaway is, don't ask why questions. No, I'm serious. Don't ask why questions. You made a really excellent point there. And my takeaway from Josh, of course, is...
Well, ask yourself why, right? Like, why am I chasing pleasure? Why am I... But when you're dealing with trauma, I mean, I think we're putting it in context because, yes.
Yeah. And then with Josh, it's always... Josh and I have a lot of conversations. It's always be introspective, know yourself, watch yourself,
question
check yourself, question yourself. So I have since it sounds like we're wrapping things up here.
Well, yeah,
I have a couple of quotes. See if you
Awesome.
agree with them. See if you agree with them.
I like quotes.
Okay, yay.
Funny.
It says here. Oh, there, yeah. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. True?
I like it.
True, false?
I like it.
Find
yes.
the fire of find out what compassion means, and then yes.
Yes.
Find out seriously, strongly, intensely.
Yes. And another one here by the Dalai Lama. He's just so quotable. Each of us in our own way can try to spread compassion into people's hearts. Western civilizations these days place great importance on filling the human brain with knowledge, but no one seems to care about filling the human heart, with compassion. And so I think there's truth to that as well.
I agree.
Anything else? Do you have any questions or comments?
I don't. I just had a wonderful time. Thank
Yeah, I
you all
appreciate
so
you.
much.
Good.
And what a great example of coming together and thinking together without we can disagree, but who knows? Nobody knows, so we disagree.
Well,
great,
I flipped
and
some
nobody's-
tables over here,
Oh, no.
so I was so mad.
No,
I'm
no.
just kidding.
But this is, I think, I always say if humans had to do one thing right, this is all you can do is talk to somebody and say, I don't know, and I want to think with you about what's going on, what these words we have, and this quality we're trying to be, the unity, the wholeness.
Yeah. Oh, and
Thank you.
volunteer
Yes,
for CASA.
volunteer with CASA.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, Chelsea.
How about a phone number or website? I mean,
was
is it like
great.
casa.com?
Yeah.
So it's casaforeverychild.org, and then I don't have our number memorized.
You got Google though, baby.
But
so
yeah,
just
yeah, you can
Casa,
literally
Waco,
just
Texas,
Google
man.
Casa McLennan County.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank y'all both so much.
I think we're done.
It has to do with one's point of view. I have to put it that way. One's sense, one's system of reality.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.